Cool. To give you a little bit of very, very quick background on the House of Tag before we jump in, we're essentially a fashion incubation sort of brand where we eventually want to build up a platform where we can support different entrepreneurs, businesses, and designers within the fashion industry to help you connect so that all of you can build your businesses stronger and better. And we're starting off by bringing people together underneath this sort of banner of community to understand some of the big players in the industry and what they think about the industry, to just give you a little bit of that insight. So today we're speaking to Kelly, who, like Jeremiah mentioned, is someone who has a lot of experience in the industry. I'm not going to speak for her though. She has so much to say. So Kelly, I'd love it if you would to introduce yourself to everybody. Just let us know who you are and what your story is.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I find it, first and foremost, I just want to say that I find it so strange talking about myself. I'm just not that way inclined. It's just not really my thing. But I'm very grateful to have people that want to hear me speak and that want me to speak about my story. Yeah, I'm really, really grateful for that. So my name is Kelly Okogwu. I might as well add that Nkem in. That's my middle name, and I'm very proud to be Nigerian. And I have worked in the music industry, or if we say, let's say music industry, entertainment, creative industry for nearly 10 years now. I started at the age of 21 as an assistant at a company called Disturbing London. I was one of the sort of founding, members there. I think when I joined, there was probably about 3 staff members or 4 at max. So I remember being sort of thrown right into the deep end and kind of just doing all sorts of different things. So I went in as an assistant. I found myself assisting across every area of the company. So from the talent management side to the accounting side to the event side. And it was really intense. I won't pretend about that. It was really, really intense. When you are thrown into the deep end at a startup company, it is going to be intense, especially at that kind of age. But I would never change it for the world. I learned so much. And I believe that there's no better experience than first-hand experience, like actually doing the job, the practical of the job. I think education's amazing. I went to uni and I love studying, and I studied sociology and communications, and I love studying. I think education's great. However, I also believe the practical is really, really important, and I don't know how much that is spoken about. What else? Yeah.
Kelly, I'm going to jump into the questions because you could go on for
Yeah.
ages because you've got such incredible experience, honestly.
I know.
But this is why I wanted people to hear this, because there's so much that you have somehow managed to fit into less than 10 years, which, for people who aren't familiar with the music industry, who are here sort of because of the interest in fashion, that's why we set up the question about how the two industries link together. Because as you can see, they're so closely intertwined that when you work on one, and Kelly's very into the music industry, she naturally ends up doing events and helps setting up a business for the fashion within the fashion industry too. So much comes out of that. The first question I want to ask you, Kelly, off the back of all of that is, why is it so important to have that connection between the fashion and the music industries, right? So you mentioned that you naturally went on to help set up What We Wear after working with Tiny on Imhotep. But why is it that just kind of was a natural outcome? Why is it so important for people starting a fashion brand to understand that connection?
So from my experience, when Tiny sort of rose to fame, I just remember the prominence of his name at that time. It was very apparent that, the fact he became a instrumental figure in the fashion world because of his look, And it became very clear to us that, you know, being a successful artist brings about not only a lot of opportunities, but opens the doors in the fashion industry as well. I guess probably not for everybody, to be honest, but for, you know, for a certain type of artist. And we're seeing it more and more now, you know, with people even like Jay Huss that has started his own line, and that sold out so quickly. And, you know, there's other people like Kanye West who's done a lot as well. But I guess to answer your question, there was a natural synergy between Tiny as an artist, Tiny's interest in fashion, Disturbing London as a company, their interest in fashion, and the connection between the British Fashion Council. The British Fashion Council are all about helping, they're a not-for-profit organization, and they're all about helping young brands and, young people with ideas that may not necessarily have the funds to, fund something, to create something. They're all about that. They're all about opening doors, having a great network to connect the dots with people. And I think at the time, Tiny was a young, fresh artist, and they were all over that. So naturally, like I say, he just became a very prominent figure in fashion. And off the back of that, Disturbing London set up a clothing line as well. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Disturbing London set up a clothing line that was running for a while, and they went into Selfridges, and then Tiny just decided to set up a brand off the back of that. And what we found is that, like I said earlier, fashion and music coincide, and without one, I don't really think the other can exist. Because even if you look at Fashion Week, for example, Fashion Week is all about front rows and who's on the front row. And more often than not, they're artists or some kind of talent that are well known. You see brands collaborating with artists on campaigns, for example. I guess from that, we can see that once you have a brand that might be prominent or not so prominent, and you connect an artist with that brand, then naturally both people win, if you get what I mean. Both an artist has a really great platform, that's going to help the brand, and say a brand has a great platform, that will help the artist. So I hope that sort of answers your.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly what I wanted to know, is especially, if you want to get into, if you're trying to break into the fashion industry, I think it's so helpful to understand the music industry, which seems like its own kind of beast. Actually, they perpetuate and help each other grow. What if you had to think of one word, and there's one word I'm thinking of, but it's probably going to be different to what you're thinking. If there was one sort of word, if you were into either one of those businesses or skill, maybe one kind of thing you'd want to build or practice, what would it be?
To build or practice?
Yeah, to make that your business successful, whether it's in music or fashion, and you want to get the other one in, how do you really, if you want to incorporate the other of those two, either music or fashion, how do you make that work?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is your network. I don't know if that was what was on your mind.
I'm thinking partnerships, which is very similar.
Okay.
Thinking,
similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because over the years, building a solid network and just almost friendships in the industry, that is so, so important. Again, just having been in the industry for 9, coming to 10 years, a lot of during my time when I was working on the What We Wear brand, we collaborated, for example, with Converse and Filling Pieces and Daily Paper and Nike as well. And those collaborations were not easy to come about. That's not necessarily the right way to put it, but they were easier to come about because of the relationship. So relationships, also another word, the network, And you mentioned partnerships. So yeah, those partnerships came about because of the relationships that were built over years. So it's just
Yeah.
really important to build relationships, to just keep them. That's super important.
And how would you advise other people to go about building those relationships? I know sort of within Imhotep especially, there was sort of a lot of those are not, maybe not in place, but they were sort of easier to create. You had such a big network already. But to someone just getting into it, how would you advise them to go and do that?
That's a great question. I think definitely never be shy to reach out to people. Never be shy to, I think a lot of people that may not feel like they have a connection to anything or anyone. I don't know if people still feel like that though, because of social media. I started in the industry when I don't think Instagram wasn't created at that time. But it's so easy now to reach out to people. There's so many different ways to just reach out to people. Don't be shy. Like, I think that is definitely a great way to build your network and your database, and just to build relationships. Just message someone on Instagram, or find an email and email someone, or just talk to someone that might know someone. Don't be shy to do that, because that's how you are going to build relationships.
Yeah, there's the worst thing someone can do is say no to you, right? And it's
Yeah.
that whole thing around, are we actually being held back? Is someone actually going to say no, or is it just our mindset telling us you can't do that?
Yeah,
And it doesn't
definitely.
hurt to drop someone an email. Definitely. And one of the things we always advise as well is to try to find networking events. And well, it's a bit hard right now, but
Yeah.
Corona aside, to
Mm.
try to find events and things you can go to that help connect you to people. Thank
Yeah.
you, Kelly, for that. That's a really good answer to that question. I like that.
No
I'm going
problem.
to take a question from the chat. Colleen has asked us, can you be successful as a fashion designer with little or no knowledge of the music industry? Which is a very good question for this webinar.
Yeah, that is a good question. Hi, Colleen. um, you definitely can, because, like I say, how I explained the journey at Disturbing London, and with like Tiny specifically, he's an artist. He didn't start off as a fashion designer, which he's now become, as well as other people like I mentioned Jay House as well, and someone like Kanye. But yeah, you don't really need, as long as you start from somewhere. I think doors start opening naturally, as long as you just start. So my answer to that question is you can definitely be successful.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the main things that we wanted to come out of this webinar, which is already happening, which is great, is that the link and the partnership between the two is very, very powerful if you can leverage them. And it might be that you can't leverage them right away, but that you build up a brand that is eventually able to leverage
Mm,
that or be part of it. And that's very powerful for your
yeah.
brand. So it's more part of your long-term strategy, unless you're
Mm,
in a position like Kelly was in supporting someone like Tiny Tempa, where they were kind of able to do it at the same time. Cool. Thank you for
and
that, Kelly.
Seven, I like what you said about long term, because I think it's really important to mention that nothing happens overnight. Like, it just doesn't really work like that. Even if we look at, you know, just newer brands now, when you look at the background story of certain people's stories, we always just see the end result. It's so easy to see the end result, isn't it? But when you really look at people's stories, you'll see that most people have been doing things for years, almost decades, before they've actually got recognized by the public. So yeah, I like that.
100%. Yeah, it's not no such thing as overnight success.
No.
100%. Cool. Thank you for that, Kelly. Jeremiah has asked us a question. His connection is not doing so hot at the moment, so I'm going to
Okay.
ask you his question for him. He asks, tell us more about your partnership with the British Fashion Council, how it was having fashion shows on the main schedule of London Fashion Week, within What We Wear. And then as an addition to that, how did you and Tiny approach the British Fashion Council to begin with?
Okay, so more about the relationship first, and how it was being on a schedule like that. To be honest, at first, when we did our first show, I think it was 2017 in January, it was quite scary because when you see it from the offset and you see it from an outsider point of view, it just looks scary. That's the best way of putting it. It just looks scary, and then when you're actually doing it, it's even scarier. But it was the first show was such a huge success. We just had I remember there was so much prep, so much went into it, honestly, so much hard work. Like the design team done extremely well. Like it was just a lot. Like fashion is not for the faint-hearted. Neither is music. It's very intense. It's very much a 24/7 thing. It's not, 9 to 5, go home, shut down. It's, your brain is active throughout. But yeah, that was great. It was a huge success. And off the back of that, because it did so well, the British Fashion Council were just really supportive and, connecting us with certain people and encouraging us to do another show. And, even if we didn't want to do a show, I remember one year we did a great dinner that was really good after doing about 5 shows, I think, and a few pop-ups. So yeah, that kind of answers that. And then in terms of how did that relationship come about, it came about when I was working at Disturbing London. So they hugely took an interest in who Tiny was as an artist and decided to just bring him in on lots of different shows, sitting at the front row. That's often what artists do. I don't know if people are that aware of it. Not all artists, but artists that are interested in fashion. They'll get the artist to come in, sit on the front row, just be, it's a great way of promoting yourself as an artist as well. So that relationship started off there. So back to, I think, Pauline's question and just long-term strategy in general. The relationship started so long ago. So it was not easy, but it was a bit easier to have certain conversations when it came to being on the schedule, London Fashion Week. I know they do the fashion awards as well. So they've been really kind to sort of get us in there and things like that. So yeah, it was a long relationship. Probably again 6 years of building that relationship until we managed to sort of do something with them to that capacity.
Yeah, so it's essentially a lot of time spent with the relationship that is, really hard to generate in the first place. And I think that's why the 2 bits of advice you've given us already about making sure you're out there networking, but then when you find those networks or those people that are really interesting that you want to connect with more have I cut out? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, good. Just checking. Sorry. Yeah, but when you have those people that you have those connections with, make sure you continue over a long period of time working with and engaging with them, because it is not overnight. I think that's a very good answer. Thank you, Kelly. I have a lot of questions I want to ask you off the back of a couple of things you briefly mentioned, but quickly before we do that, we have another question from the chat from Ananda, who asks, what advice would you give to someone who has just graduated university and wants to go into the music industry, but is having trouble at landing an interview? Which is a very good question.
I think to start in the music industry, I think work experience, I know she mentioned having trouble landing an interview, but I think unpaid work to begin with is really important. And you can do that by, now that she's talking to me, I can always kind of point her into the right direction, or it's always important to just reach out to people. Just go online, go on Instagram, just go online, just whatever platforms you like to go on, and just find out what's going on. Obviously not right now because we are kind of all locked down and inside, but it's just really important to just be out and about, go to talks, Last year I did a talk with like Samsung and it was all about music, and It was just open to people that were keen on getting into that industry. So things like that, you know, you meet people, it's all about networking. The music industry and the fashion industry really is all about networking. Networking is so important. So that is my advice, and feel free to just like, I don't know, Seven, you can
No,
connect us.
100%.
I could just give her some advice. But yeah, it's just important to just be out there. Yeah.
100%. I think, as much as that isn't like, that's the kind of thing that especially younger people might kind of expect, and be like, oh, not the answer again. Within this industry, it actually is so incredibly important. I think the thing about, unpaid work experience that frightens some young people is, well, will I be treated fairly, or will it be seen later on as actually being that useful? But from your experience, has people coming in, working for you, working with you, even if it's unpaid, what has made you gone, yes, this is someone I want to work with, or this is someone I want to be part of my team? Does that kind of make sense? What
That
quality does
makes
someone have within
that,
both the music and the fashion side of things that you've done that have made you go, this is great?
so if I automatically, I'm thinking back to the fashion side. We worked with a young PR lady who had experience in the PR. But are you talking about people without experience, or
I
does it
mean, I
really?
mean both. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, even if you don't have much experience, if you've got the right qualities, that's very, very
Yeah,
desirable to work with.
yeah,
And for
yeah.
that hiring, and to help answer that last question as well.
I think so. If we talk about qualities, great qualities to have are work ethic. Work ethic is really, really important. Being able to communicate well, being able to like think for yourself and outside the box, and not kind of just lean on the people that you're working with, is always really important for us, to just have people that can think as well and bring forth ideas, and are quite okay and comfortable to go out to places and, like you mentioned, events and meet people, networking. So it's always nice to see people with those kind of qualities. And in terms of experience, it's really nice when you see people with a bit of experience in the industry. It doesn't have to be much, but once you see a bit of experience on their CV, it's always nice, because oh right, okay, cool, they've done a pop-up, so they know how to bring people together, they know how to organize, they know how to. So that's also really important. A little bit of experience is always nice. And like I say, if you don't have experience, just having certain qualities, especially when you're starting, enthusiasm is so important. People want to see enthusiastic, sort of happy, bubbly people that are just ready to just take over the world. That is what people like to see.
I love that. That's one part I didn't actually expect, but it makes so much sense. It's that, especially in an industry that can be so difficult, and like you said, so much can be going on at once, to have that sort of can-do positive attitude, I imagine that brings everyone's spirits up. So that's actually a really great answer. Thank you for that, Kelly. Um, Off the back of that, Colleen has asked us a question, another question. If you are struggling to make connections in the fashion industry, how do
Mm-hmm.
you try and make connections in the music industry that helps you with your fashion brand? So very specific, sort of within that networking answer that we gave earlier, a very specific question within that. It's a very good question.
So if you're struggling to make connections, you make help. That's a good question. I mean, everything goes back to putting yourself out there. Um, it is always, at first, it will always be difficult. For example, I'm naturally like introverted, and I know it might sound weird because I might not come across that way, but I naturally am. Like, I like being at home. I'm just like that kind of person. But when you're kind of put in an environment and you want to thrive in that environment, you're going whether you like being out late or not, especially to begin with, when you're trying to build yourself up, you know, it's not everything. I mean, life is a bit like that, isn't it? It's not everything we like that we do. It just doesn't work like that. So it's just about being uncomfortable, putting yourself out there, getting out of your comfort zone. Like, not much happens in our comfort zones.
Yeah.
That's like,
100%.
so hopefully that.
Yeah, it's sort of like, like you mentioned comfort zone. There you've also got what we call your stretch zone. So what happens after you stretch past your comfort zone? And I think, unfortunately, there isn't like one easy answer to that,
Yeah.
to this kind of question. But if you needed to think of, networking events is one we've mentioned already, other examples of ways people put themselves out there, what kind of things come to your mind?
You cut out a little, just for a tiny bit there.
My internet is being a bit weird at the moment. I'm sorry, everyone. We've already mentioned networking events. If you could think of other ways of people being able to put themselves out there, what comes to your mind?
It's a good question. I think if I'm thinking about the current age that we're in, social media comes to my mind. Uh, I think LinkedIn is great as well, if I can mention that. And not being afraid to, excuse me, not being afraid to reach out to people. So, for example, I hope this helps with what I'm about to say, but there came a time in my life where I had to seek out, mentors and role models. I had to just seek them out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have kept going forward. Like, it goes back to the comfort zone things. Things don't just land on your lap or just happen. They don't just happen. It doesn't quite work like that. You have to seek things out. So I actually just started looking around, whether it was on LinkedIn or talking to somebody or just kind of putting it out there and just hoping it would happen. And, just, yeah, that's really important. Just putting yourself out there.
Yeah. So finding as many ways, even
Yeah.
things like this webinar, some of our tickets end up selling just through Eventbrite's own platform, people searching for places to go and learn new things or meet, new people. And there are loads of things out there and loads of groups out there. Searching, I think again over the long term. Definitely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kelly.
No problem.
Cool. A big chunk of the questions for me that I'm really interested to hear your answers to. One of the things that some people might know about Kelly from, what we put in her bio on Eventbrite is that Kelly does a lot, especially nowadays, around well-being and sort of mental health and people's and teams' well-being, and how can you take care of yourself. So much of what you've mentioned, Kelly, has alluded to this idea that it's very heavy and very stressful at times, both music and the fashion industries, the connection between the two, whether you're just working in one, it's a long haul, all of those things that can create so much pressure, right? So my first question for you is, in that and especially when you're doing a small business and it's so competitive because they're also competitive industries, why is it so important to take care of yourself? B, how do you actually do it?
It's a good question. Okay, I have a lot to say about well-being. One of the reasons why I started my well-being journey is because well-being is not at all a point of focus, or was not, maybe a bit now. We have certain platforms, certain like Mind and Music Matters, 24-hour, helplines for people that may be suffering or struggling from mental health. And, statistics show that people that work in the music industry are 3 times more likely to suffer from mental ill health. So there's slowly but surely, over the past few years, not long, there's been more recognition around it. However, from experience, well-being definitely wasn't a focus. It's quite interesting. I have friends that work in other intense fields, like, you know, the legal field or, you know, the financial sectors. And it's great speaking to them because they often do have well-being imprints within their companies. But the music industry, first and foremost, there's no real structure to it. And when people think about the music industry, it's almost such an exciting thing to go into that people are not really thinking about their well-being. You know, you're so excited to get there. By the time you get in there, you know, you just want to prove yourself, you want to do all these things, and then you kind of forget about, you know, other important things. So I started working on my well-being. So I went on this whole journey about 3 years ago because I realized that I really wasn't taking care of myself. I was so focused on my work and just being the best and proving myself and people pleasing, but I just really just forgot about myself. So yeah, I went on this whole journey, man, which included things like coaching, like life coaching, which included things like, I love exercise anyway, but just finding what really works for me. At one point I got into yoga. I don't do yoga really anymore, but actually I don't do it at all anymore. But I got into that at one point. I love running, you know, just things that, especially from the community we come from, right? I'm a Black woman. I come from a family that hustled and worked really hard to like get here. So like well-being, you don't really talk about that in our community. It's not something we know to hustle. That's what we know. So I had to figure that out for myself. Just what makes me feel good, going outside in nature, walking around, like just being around the greenery, you know, having I live on I manage, you know, I'm thankful to have my own place. So I love, like in my house there's just so many plants around. Just what makes me feel good, what's good for me. And that's how that well-being journey started. And then off the back of that, I really care about people, and I've always worked with, even at Imhotep, I work with people like Notes and other young, fresh talent, Lost Girl, Callie Claire. And every time I speak to these young people, even Jeremiah, I work very closely with Jeremiah, and I worked with a model for a long time. And it's like, are you guys even looking after yourself? Because if you're not looking after your mind, like your mind is the most important thing. And you often find that most people are not looking after their mind. And I just don't believe you can fully function as your best self if you're not looking after your mind. So off the back of that journey, I really am so passionate about well-being. And more recently, over the years, I was doing some sessions, bringing people together, curating some well-being sessions. But now I've almost broadened that, and I've created some, you know, sessions like mental health awareness, well-being awareness, you know, thriving through change. And I've partnered with a beautiful lady and a few others, and they have more corporate experience. So we go into companies and we just bring in the whole well-being conversation. And it's, you know, people are loving it. I definitely think we're in a season of that now.
Amazing. And that's, for me, that is so important to hear because, you know, as someone who coaches other people and as someone who is involved with all of these guys in TAG, we want to bring people together. It's like you said, where we just don't seem to talk about it. And especially in industries or communities or backgrounds where we're used to hustling a lot. And so we don't let up and we don't take care of ourselves. But one of the things that, you know, I talk about a lot, and that I think we've even had this conversation before, Kelly, where, you know, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to burn out. And if you burn out, nothing's going to get done. So what's the point? Do you know what I mean? It's counterproductive. So I love, you know, the answer that you've given there. And I love how important that's become to you. What I really want to know now is, how have you tried to implement that in your organizations, right? So with all the people that you work with,
Mm.
in those industries, like, within Imhotep and What We Wear, how do you make sure that they're doing those? Because you recognize that we very much need to be doing it. How do
Yeah.
you support them to be doing it?
I think that's an ongoing thing. I definitely became very aware that well-being is just not what people are thinking about. They're just thinking about they just go, go, go. It's just go, go, go. Next thing, go, go, go. I in my During my time at Imhotep and What We Wear, I brought in a coach. That was one thing that I did, and I thought that was such a great thing to do. So the coach, she was with us probably for about maybe 6 to 8 months, and she would come in maybe every other week or maybe once a month, and she would sit with everyone individually. She'd see how they were doing. She'd coach them through challenges and things. I did that personally because I saw a coach and I saw the value of seeing a coach. Again, just I was really into yoga at one point, so I would take some of my talent to sessions, like yoga sessions and things. And every time I speak to the talent that I work with, my first question is, how are you? How are you mentally? What have you been doing to look after yourself? How is your mental state? What have you done for well-being? Like, that's just so important to me. Um, and again, these sessions that I've started, I think that will just be a big driving force for change from me. I believe there's a big gap, and yeah, that's why I guess I've started it.
110%. I think for me, the main takeaway there is, if you notice within yourself, but also within, your team, that there is that lacking there, same as before, when you want to reach out to find the right things, for yourself and your business networking, it's the same thing. Reach out and look out there. What can I do to help everyone around me? And then what happens is you become so much more productive. you know
Yeah.
what I really want to know for you is, what is your biggest kind of highlight and takeaway as a result of doing all of those things? What impact did you see that made you go, wow, okay, I'm really glad I did that?
That's a good question. More people thinking about their well-being, more people thinking about the way they work, why they do what they do. Just more people just I'm all about I've always been about conscious living as well. I believe we live in a world where people are just so used to just the go, 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 the pace of life. That's why it's so weird we came into this time, but it's almost like we needed it because that pace was so unrealistic for a lot of people. And that go, 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 go life, you're just not really going to know. You're not going to know who you are because you just won't. Like, you're not conscious. You're pretty much unconscious, just working, just going with the flow, flow, flow. So you don't get to know you, and you don't really get to know or understand why you're doing what you're doing and the purpose of where you're going and all that. So yeah, I think I've definitely seen people question things more. And I think off the back of my journey and where I was versus where I am now, I think that has made people go, wow, okay, cool. So this well-being thing, this is real. Like, because like I say, there was a time where I was working so much. I just got to a place where I didn't even know when I got there, but I did burn out and I did crash. And I was still going. I was still going because that's what you do. You go and you go. But I think off the back of that, people have seen so much change in me as a person, so much transition, so much more confidence in who I am and what I've done and where I'm going. And I think that's making people realize the importance of really taking care of yourself and really focusing on that area.
Amazing. That's, for me, the biggest takeaway there is, how is almost like, how do you view what you're doing with yourself and to yourself?
Yeah.
Do you just stay on that autopilot, or do you try to more consciously take a step back sometimes, which is just, it can make the world of difference. um,
Mm.
just so that everyone knows, we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes because it's coming up on 7 o'clock. If you've got a final quick question you want to ask Kelly, please type it now. Kelly, I have one final quick question I want to ask you around sort of the well-being stuff that you do. If you needed to give people one quick exercise to do, just to make themselves feel better if they're caught up in what you just described, you know, sort of needing to take a step back, what is your number one favorite exercise to do?
Mindful movement.
What's that?
Okay, let me just kind of show you. Right. So I did this for someone's Instagram actually. It's called White Studio. So if anyone wants to check it out, or you can go on White Studio. I did a little mindful movement on there. So I don't do it daily. I would be fibbing if I said I did it daily. But when I go on my walks, I pretty much walk daily, or I run daily, or just whenever I feel like I'm like doing a lot, because I can be a go person. I just start moving mindfully. So that would be closing my eyes. Let me try and do something. So like closing my eyes like this, and I'm sitting down, but you can do the standing up, and like lifting my arms up like this with breath. So I'm wearing a blazer, so this might be quite hard. So look, like this, and then sort of looking up, all with breath and with your eyes closed, and then breath again, looking down, and just repeating that a few times. You can also do the one arm one. Again, it's so much better when you're standing up. Also like shoulder rolls with breath, like it's just so lovely. And when you're moving, because mindfulness is brilliant, but like when you're moving, we need to stretch our bodies. It's so good to do this in the morning, at night, and just like stretching in general. Just, I know I'm really into it, but it's just so good. And the more you do it, it's just really, really good. So yeah, mindfulness is great.
I think that's an amazing exercise actually, because, you know, there's so much out there about, you know, what people will say, mental health experts, but just, you know, people who have realized that they stressed out too much is stuff like that, which just takes literally 60 seconds. Or even if you don't want to go that far, maybe you feel silly or weird, which sometimes happens as well, especially if you're in like a workplace or something. The easiest thing to do is just close your eyes for 60 seconds and take some deep breaths, and it does wonders. 60 seconds is not a big impact on your day, but it makes you feel so much better. I love that so much. Thank you so
what
much.
do you, and I've got a question for you quickly. What do you do?
If I've been in the middle of a crazy big work day, I will do literally but I need to keep going. I will do exactly what I've just described, where I will literally 60 seconds, I will just focus on nothing but my breath, and sort of it just lets my brain relax. And I'll do a little stretching as well, like you just said, because it releases that tension that builds up, especially in our shoulders and our necks. And, you know, for everyone out there, if you're hustling all day, every day, it makes such a big difference when you're out and about. While we're at home with Corona, you know, keeping us indoors, it's not always as necessary. It might be that there's other things we can do because we're at home and we have the flexibility. But that is something that's very simple that anyone can do from anywhere. Okay, cool. We are reaching on 7 o'clock. We're just before 7 o'clock. So we're going to wrap up. Kelly, where can everyone find you or reach out to you if they have any sort of questions or they want to follow you on any social platforms?
So my Instagram is Kelly Okogwu. That's Kelly, Kelly, Okogwu. My LinkedIn is the same.
Nice.
And yeah, those are the main platforms that I use. And
cool.
If you want to sort of follow me on there, and you have any questions or you need advice, then we could just exchange details. We could just email each other if that's easier. But yeah, those two are the main platforms.